On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks suffer their third straight loss. They get swept out of Los Angeles in disappointing fashion. Yes, they were undermanned, but not the greatest performance in the world from the Hawks on this Saturday night. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1880 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you late in the night here on a Saturday night into Sunday morning. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. For big upsets and game-winning drives, NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, and new customers right now can bet $5. Get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. And the place to go is FanDuel.com. To get started, I also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make sure first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. Please like the video on YouTube as you're watching it, subscribe to audio platforms, and tell your friends about the show. And we'll dive in now to what became a pretty ugly loss for the Hawks, 131-105 in LA against the Clippers on this Saturday. They were swept away now. The Hawks were in Los Angeles, back-to-back losses. Underdogs both games, but still 0-2 in that stretch. Now three games in a row, the Hawks have now lost to fall back to 500 at 18-18 on the still young season. They were shorthanded in this game, as that's definitely going to be coming up throughout this podcast. No Jalen Johnson, no Bogdanovic in this one, and Kawhi Leonard comes back for the Clippers. So a pretty rough injury report swing sort of against the Hawks during the day on Saturday. They were down 15 in the first quarter, fall all the way back to kind of level the game out, and then give up a big run in the second quarter. It was pretty rough in that second quarter on the whole for Atlanta in this game. And after that happened, it was never really close again. You know, they didn't get blown out in the second half necessarily, but they were already kind of down 20 points. So it didn't necessarily matter along the way. And look, to set the stage a little bit here, our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook made the Hawks a pretty big underdog in this game. Now, they've only been a big underdog of really any kind twice in the last 3.5 weeks or so. Once was against Denver without Jalen, and they got blown out. Once was tonight without Jalen, and they got blown out again. So both times the Hawks were kind of quote-unquote supposed to lose. They lost in pretty lopsided fashion, for whatever that's worth to you. Anyway, the Clippers are pretty good, so it's not like this is a terrible opponent to lose to. But big picture, not a good performance from Atlanta. That's pretty obvious when you look at the scoreboard. A loss in this game would have been explainable, especially without Jalen. They were underdogs for a reason, but losing like this was certainly frustrating, especially after a loss on Friday in the first game in Los Angeles. So my top takeaway from this game, analysis-wise, is that the offense was just atrocious for the Hawks in this game. I'll acknowledge this. The Clippers have a top 5 defense in the league. They are very stout defensively. They're very good. Quinn gave them credit after the game, as he should have. At the same time, that makes it a little bit more explainable, but not in full. The Hawks were just bad offensively in this one. Now, the big issue, as we'll get into, was ball security. But the Hawks had a 95.5 offensive rating in the full game. That is really, really rough. And that actually includes a little bit of a run in the fourth quarter where the Hawks were actually making some more shots in garbage time. It was worse than that for a lot of this game, which is pretty dire. The top issue on the offensive side was the ball security. 23 turnovers that led to 32 points directly. That is just going to get you beat more often than not. You got to be so good everywhere else to overcome that. And the Hawks obviously were not in this game. They were below average shooting wise, not disastrous. 55% true shooting in the game, not crazy poor for the Hawks. They were okay from 2, 35% from 3, but not anything great. And then neither team in this game actually did anything on the opposite glass. So there were no extra possessions for Atlanta to kind of play with to kind of overcome the lack of ball security. Actually lost the possession battle by 8 because of turnovers, basically exclusively. But here's where it gets a little bit interesting on the opposite side of the floor. On the whole, they were awful in this game offensively. They were another level of awful with Trae Young off the floor. Now, that isn't a huge surprise. It's been something I've tracked for years on this podcast, in my writing, etc. I've covered every game of Trae's career. It's not an exaggeration. I've been covering the team since before he was in the league. And it's been a problem for the vast majority of his career. But without Jalen Johnson as well, it is dire when the Hawks are without Trae on the court in a game like this. And tonight was a perfect encapsulation of that. So when Trae was on the court in his, I believe he ended up playing, 34 minutes. And it would have been more than that had the Hawks not been blown out in the fourth quarter. He was going to play probably 40 plus with the way it was tracking if this game was competitive. But in 34 minutes of action in this game for Trae Young, the Hawks had a 106 offensive rating. That is not good. That is bad. That's like bottom 5 in the league bad. But it's not atrocious. It's not unplayably ridiculous. But it's not good. Anyway, now, in the 14 minutes with Trae off the court in this game, the Hawks had a 68.8 offensive rating. It's hard to explain how bad that is. Like, worst in the league is like 105 this year. 68.8 for more than a full quarter of basketball. This is not a 3-minute sample size. This is a 14-minute sample of the Hawks being basically lighting the world on fire in a bad way offensively with Trae off the floor. Yeah, I mean, you can't withstand that. There are lots of stars in the league that have big on-off splits. The Hawks just saw one on Wednesday. Nikola Jokic is probably the best example of this. The Nuggets, when he plays, are awesome. When he sits, they are terrible, almost without fail. But they don't have a 68.8 offensive rating with Jokic off the floor. It's crazy. The headliner of that, by the way, is when Trae was off the court in this game, the Hawks turned the ball over on 28% of their possessions. 28%. For reference there, league average is about 14%. So double league average turnover rate. The worst in the league is like 17% or something like that. It's impossible to turn the ball over that often for that amount of time. Again, 14 minutes of game action. And it's not surprising. The Hawks offense with Trae off the court does not really function, especially without Jalen. The big one's the turnovers, but because of that, and because of how bad the offense was, they put the defense in bad positions. And that's kind of the theme of this game. For me, the headline takeaway after watching this game now twice and picking it apart a little bit was that the offense was so bad that the defense didn't really have a chance in this game. Now, the Clippers had 99th percentile frequency in transition in this game, which means they ran and ran and ran and ran. And most of that has to do with the Hawks turning the ball over a lot. But also some missed shots, certainly. But if you don't turn the ball over that much, it's hard to run that often against you. And Atlanta's defense was not good in this game. I'll say that now. Like, I'm not taking the defense off the hook entirely. The Hawks were not good defensively in this game. They had issues in getting back and matching up in transition. Like, as bad as the turnovers were, the Hawks could have slowed some of them down, let's just say. They also allowed the ball to get to the middle of the floor way too often in this game, especially in semi-transition along the way. There was some of the usual over-helping stuff on the back line. I am not absolving the defense on the whole. But I thought it was so very clear to me, and people kind of, and I get it, when the other team scores 131, you see the raw point total. This is, by the way, a very fast-paced game, which kind of inflates the numbers. The Hawks ended this game with a 117 defensive rating. Now, again, that's not good, but it's not outlier bad. Like, that's a normal-looking defensive rating over 48 minutes against a playoff-caliber opponent, like the Clippers are. The Hawks could have conceivably won this game playing that way defensively on the whole. They could not win the game playing the way they did on offense. That's the simplest way to put this. The offense was not good enough to give the defense a chance along the way. I won't give you all the numbers that I have. I have even way more of them. They were drawing dead with their offense, especially their non-Trae offense in this one. By the way, just for reference, I know I talked about the Clippers running all night long. LA had a 98 offensive rating in half-court settings. So when they were not running, they had a 98 offensive rating. That is almost exactly league average. So when the Hawks were actually able to set their defense, they were league average defensively. That isn't great. It's implicitly average. But they were competent defensively when they were able to set up the defense. But when they weren't, it was a disaster. And the funniest stat of the night, unless it was one of the Trae stats, was that the Clippers ended up this game with 46 fast break points. 46 fast break points in the game. For context, this year the league leader in the NBA is the Nuggets. They average 20 per game. The league leader averaged 20 per game. LA had 46. So, long story short, the offense was not good enough, and we'll get into kind of why that is. Of course, my mentions are full, and I totally understand it. People asking why the Hawks are not doing anything at backup point guard. It's been talked about a lot. I can't solve that problem on one podcast or in one segment. It's been a problem that I've acknowledged for a long time. It's not great. They were obviously banking on Kobe Bufkin this year, all those things. But it is a problem. It is a flaming problem. We see that now. It's not like a mystery. It hasn't been for a while if you've been paying attention. It's magnified with Jalen unavailable, for sure, because he's their number 2 initiator by a wide margin. It'd be helpful if Bogey was Bogey, and he hasn't been for most of the season. So all those things are wrapped into one. I will also just say, is my to stay on brand, we'll say, this is not a loss that I would like totally freak out about. It's kind of the same stuff that we already knew. And if you were already panicking, sure. But the Hawks being 18-18 on January 4th into 5th right now is not a surprisingly bad outcome. If anything, it might be surprisingly good for some people. They are ahead of their pace that people projected them to be at preseason. And yeah, you lose 3 games in a row. I get people are going to get angsty. That's the way it goes in the NBA. But also, they were underdogs in all 3 games. It's a West Coast trip. And no one ever wants to hear this, but I always say it before the trip, during the trip, after the trip. Everyone in the league hates West Coast trips. They're awful, especially when you're playing good teams. Now, if the Hawks lose, we'll talk about this at the end of the podcast as well. If the Hawks lose on Tuesday in Utah, that is a bad loss, like an actual bad loss, no matter what. And yeah, the margin in this game is not good. The Hawks did not play well in this game. I'm not saying otherwise, but I would take a deep breath. But yeah, I mean, as far as like how and why this happened, the offense was terrible. I mean, it really was. When Trae was out there, they were okay. They were competitive. He was good individually in this game. He had very little help elsewhere. But yeah, it was a catastrophe. And play the Benny Hill music, as I was talking to my friend Kevin Chenard about, both on and offline during this game. All right, we'll get into more of how this game unfolded. I have some stats for you as far as how the game flowed in the middle, observations along the way, and then my player notes at the end of the podcast and much more. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Prizepicks, and basketball season is heating up at Prizepicks. There's no better way to get real money action in play or watch your favorite NBA stars than with Prizepicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, Prizepicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Prizepicks is also the best possible way to get real money sports action. Over 10 million members have already found that out, and billions of dollars have been awarded in winnings, and they've made daily fantasy sports accessible to all at Prizepicks. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players in a wide variety of sports, including basketball, football, baseball, etc. And when you do, you actually have a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. If you think your favorite player actually is going to have 30 points or more, get more than 8 assists perhaps, they will actually let you make predictions at Prizepicks, put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I've been using Prizepicks all season long and really for quite some time now. Let me tell you, it's a lot of fun to operate and play with a flex play option as well at Prizepicks. Even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money at Prizepicks. Plus, once you hit, you get your money fast. Sometimes as fast as 15 minutes. It's honestly the best way to keep the game exciting. Now it's perfect time to join at Prizepicks as well. Download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup at Prizepicks. That's right. You don't actually have to wait to get the bonus. It's actually guaranteed for you when you play your first $5 lineup at Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. All right, before I get to the actual game flow, it's almost a mailbag question in some respects. I got a lot of questions about the injury handling of Jalen and Bogey. So Bogey had an injury management tag on the injury report on Saturday afternoon for this game. He's been dealing with a left lower leg contusion for a while. I would have been surprised, candidly, if he played both ends of the back-to-back. So him playing on Friday, I won't say that I assumed he was definitely going to be out, but I thought he was probably going to not play on Saturday. So I'm not worried about that one really at all. It is what it is. Bogey's not been good this year, don't get me wrong, but like after he missed 5 games, I would have been surprised if he played both ends of the back-to-back. So there you go. On Jalen's front, we absolutely just don't know what they went into the weekend planning for Jalen Johnson. He played on Friday. He was okay at times. Wasn't his best game in the world. He looked to me to be in some discomfort if you watched him throughout that game closely. And we just don't know how they planned on that. Like, there are no specifics on the injury. All they're saying is shoulder soreness. That's not really an injury. Like, it is an injury. He's obviously banged up and hurt to the point where he's now missed 2 games. But we don't know what the actual mechanism is. The Hawks have been comically and annoyingly vague on all injuries this entire season. It's this new NFL training staff that's made it even worse. The combination of the Hawks having an NFL training staff that's like cloaking things in obscurity and a head coach in Quinn Snyder that just refuses to talk about injuries at all. That combination means that it's hard to get anything out of the Hawks right now. So we're just guessing on that front. It is a real injury. Jalen's not resting. Like, I saw some crazy responses like, why are they load managing a 23-year-old? He is not load managing. Bogey, there might have been some load management tonight. Not necessarily like it's injury management. Like, that's a real thing. They are not load managing Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson is hurt. That's the difference. They're not resting him. He's hurt. It is what it is. Now, The questions that came in were basically, why would the Hawks have played Jalen and Bogey on Friday and not on Saturday? Okay, fair question. This is my opinion now, if you were going to play Jalen and Bogey in one game and you plan on that, which I'm not saying they did, I'm saying if that was the case, if you said, all right, we're only going to play Jalen and Bogey once out of these 2 games, I would have obviously played them on Friday. And they did. Now, again, I don't know what the Hawks are thinking about this, but that's where I would have been. Now, for instance, the Clippers are a similar of team quality to the Lakers this year. They weren't supposed to be necessarily. Clippers have overachieved so far. They actually have a better net rating than the Lakers do this year. And even if you might think the Lakers are slightly better, that's a defensible opinion. I won't argue with that right now. The Clippers have been as good as the Lakers are better. More importantly, the situation would have dictated to play them against the Lakers. For one, Friday was a back-to-back for the Lakers and not for the Hawks. So that was a potential advantage. Yes, it was on the road, but they're both on the road, and one was a situational advantage on Friday. Tonight was a back-to-back for the Hawks and not for the Clippers. That's a bad spot, schedule-wise, for the Hawks, on top of everything else. So those 2 things lean to play them against the Lakers. And then you have the sweetener, not a deciding factor, but a sweetener about the draft pick. Now, the Hawks lost the game anyway against the Lakers, but if you would have wanted to get one of the 2 wins in a vacuum, you would have chosen the Lakers win for the double win aspect, the 1.5 aspect of giving them a loss in the standings for draft pick purposes. So I don't know the Hawks did that, but if I was choosing one of the 2 and said, okay, training staff says play these guys once, I would choose Friday too, if that was my choice. Anyway, to the actual game. This is a little bit shorter than usual because it was blowout. They started to beat Krejci after he was a DNP against the Lakers. Kind of odd, but that's the nature of the beast right now. The Hawks don't really have a good option to start in place of Jalen. Now, Hunter is that option. They've wanted to stay with Hunter in that same role off the bench. He did open the third quarter playing because they were done by 20. He actually started the third quarter just because of the urgency level. But that's why that's happening. You can debate that if you want to. You got Veet, you got Garrison. They don't really have great options, let's just say. There was one nice flash by Veet actually early in the game on a nice play to alter a shot at the rim by old pal Chris Dunn. But rotationally, it was Hunter, Garrison, and Okongwu off the bench, and then Roddy as the 9th man, as we'll come back to later on in the podcast. There was a disaster stint in the first quarter where it was a 16-0 run by LA to go from the Hawks being up by 1 to down 15 in about 4 minutes. They actually committed 5 turnovers in a row at one point, and they didn't score on 10 consecutive possessions. Yeah, that kind of explanatory on its own. Now, the Hawks did actually respond to that. They had a 14-0 run right away. So it was literally back-to-back, 16-0 run by the Clippers, 14-0 by the Hawks. Garrison Matthews had 7 points in a row for Atlanta. Trae hit a 3. Riche hits the court with a dunk. And they're back in it. So, all right, refresh a little bit. The Hawks had 7 turnovers in the first quarter. It was kind of a disaster, but they hit 5 threes. They got back into it. It was a fast-paced quarter. You're fine. But the second quarter happened. So, broadly speaking, it was 45-26 in favor of LA in the second quarter. It's not David Roddy's fault, but he came into the game to begin the second quarter. He was not good, as usual. Just to really get this a little bit, I understand why he's playing right now because they are short on options. He is also not a good option. Both can be true at the same time. I can make the case that he could maybe play a little bit. I don't love that option. He is not playing like a rotation level player. His defense is terrible. All those things. They let a 10-0 run early in the quarter. They had another stretch there where they had 5 possessions in a row they didn't score. And then the Clippers were actually hot as a shooting team in that period. It was a 25-4 extended run by LA to functionally end the game. Now, it wasn't over then, but they went from down by 1 to down by 22. They were down as many as 27 by the end of the first half. Now, they did have a 7-0 run at the very, very end to get back within 20, but that was kind of it. And I mentioned before, LA had 99th percentile frequency in this game running. In the first half, it was 100th percentile. They ran absolutely at will. They ran on 33% of their possessions in the first half. That is a crazy number. And the Hawks turned the ball over 13 times, led to 22 points, and that was that. Now, I already gave the Trae on all stats, but the first half was actually more stark. Trae played 21 minutes in the first half, which is way more than he should play, and especially on a back-to-back. But both times he went to the bench. He actually sat twice. It was so bad that Quinn had to turn around and basically say, all right, Trae, you got to go back. You got to go back in or we're dead. They were -5 in 21 minutes with Trae in the first half. That's not good. You're down 5, but like it's competitive. You're fine. They were minus 15 in 3 minutes without Trae in 2 different stints. They got annihilated when he sat in that first half. In the second quarter, by the way, LA hit 7 threes in the second quarter, 45-26. And look, the game was not over, but it was over at halftime. They started Hunter, as I mentioned before. The Hawks had one faint hope of getting back in the game. It was back to 15 early in the third. They were alive. They started Hunter. That was what they had to do to kind of make sure they had one more chance to compete in the game. Trae had a really good start to the third quarter, 15 in a hurry. And then, of course, they missed 5 straight shots. After that, missed a free throw, and you're down by 21 again pretty quickly. They had some chances, like a couple of open looks to get it back to like 13, 14, 15, something like that in the middle of the third quarter. None of them fell. And then they were down 22 again at the end of the third. Like Trae was awesome in that third quarter, but the Hawks went 3 of 11 from 3, and they had to get hot, and they just never did in the third. And honestly, I would have probably considered pulling Trae after 3 quarters. He played more than I would have liked him to in the fourth quarter, as almost always with this Hawks team. Not the biggest deal in the world. Ricochet didn't play until like the 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter for whatever reason. I don't understand that. They played Roddy earlier and more than Ricochet, which I didn't understand. And also, Hunter was playing deep into the fourth too. And Hunter is, knock on wood, been healthy recently, but Hunter is always a perennial injury risk. Back to back, like why is he on the court? I don't get it. Anyway, it's one of those things where Quinn always rides guys longer than I would have. Trae played 34 minutes in a game that got blown out in it. Like he was going to play 40, 41, something like that. It would be a lot of minutes for Trae, and at least that was one of the small bright spots that this game was not a closer loss at the end, and they were able to pull the plug earlier in this game. Okay, I've shared a lot of information there. It was the big sort of knockout blow was the second quarter, that 25-4 run, end the game basically. But it was the same story that I told before. Like offensively, it just was never good enough at any point. They never had a good quarter offensively, even for, they had a couple of like good stretches, but they didn't have a 30-point quarter in the game. Like it is what it is. Okay, more to come in a second about the player-by-player evaluations and my thoughts on the rotations, etc. in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and from big upsets to game winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers get about $5 and actually get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose at FanDuel. The app at FanDuel Sportsbook is really easy to use. It gives you everything that you should need to place your bets all in one place, and there are so many ways for you to pick up a W this season with FanDuel. That means everything from over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, and game props. They have future bets, same-game parlays, live betting, and so much more. The app at FanDuel is also safe and secure. They cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes the NBA, which we talk about all the time on the podcast, plus the NFL and the playoffs, college football, college basketball, WNBA, MLB, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer leagues all over the world, F1 stuff, NASCAR and auto racing side, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to join up right now today. When you do, you start with $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, and to the player-by-player evaluations in this game. 9 guys played rotation minutes, and then that were followed by Dom Barlow as the 10th man that was active. Only 10 guys were active for the Hawks in this game. One thing I do want to say, before I forget to say this, I don't agree with the Hawks having Keaton Wallace and Daquan Plowden in the G League right now. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. They wouldn't fix anything right now for the Hawks. I think Keaton Wallace is a good two-way player, but he is not going to band-aid over the Hawks' backup point guard issues. That's been overstated by many people repeatedly this year. I think we've kind of seen that more and more, that Keaton doesn't really fix the issue. But I don't understand why they're playing in the G League on this long road trip when you have injury issues. Plowden probably wouldn't play over Roddy functionally, but like you could try it. I think he would be more interesting on defense in particular. Like even if they didn't play, like you could have blowout loss. You can't go deep into the bench. There's nobody there to go to. So it's just more of a handling issue. Like I don't think that would have changed the outcome yesterday or today or in Denver. But I would have had Wallace and Plowden with the team already. Mo Gay, by the way, is hurt. He's missed the last 2 games in College Park. We don't know anything else about like how bad that injury is, but that's why I'm not including him. If he's healthy, bring him too. But I think that I would just, honestly, the College Park plays on Sunday afternoon. So by the time you listen to this podcast, you might already know what's going on there. I would have even before that game started, sent those guys to Utah. But we'll see if they play on Sunday. It's just a small thing, but notable. Okay, to the guys who played. Don Barlow, 5 minutes, didn't really do much. Not much to add there. I might have tried him ahead of Roddy at some point. That hasn't happened. It probably won't happen anytime soon. Speaking of Roddy had 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Like, Roddy offensively was fine in this game. Did a couple things well, a couple nice passes. Defensively, I'm a broken record, but it's really, really bad. Like, it's really bad. I feel bad, honestly. I think he might be a little bit better at the 3, but he's playing the 4 out of necessity. He's really slow. He's really small. It's just not doable right now. And I feel bad picking on him, but it's hard to watch. Like, I recommend, if you want to dig into why, watch him off the ball. It's just, I don't get it. It's just, he's not, when you're as limited as he is physically, and he is limited physically, he's strong, but he's really slow and not athletic. You got to be a great positional player. And offensively, he actually has great feel. That's the crazy thing about it. He's got great feel on offense, and that does not translate to defense at all. So there you go. Okongwu had a rough one. I think he was better in the second half than he was in the first half, but 4 points, 8 rebounds for Nneka. He was 0 of 3 from 3, 2 of 4 on 2s. Just kind of a lost night. He wasn't like nothing glaring, just kind of not a ton of impact. He was kind of invisible in the first half, honestly, and not in a good way. Garrison Matthews had a good start to the game, made his first 3 shots, and then he was one of his last 7 from the field. Did take 10 threes. That's what he should be doing. 15 points off the bench, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. Like, he was not the problem. Did have 4 turnovers. That was an issue the whole game. By the way, in a game where Trae only had 3 turnovers, the Hawks had 23 turnovers because Garrison had 4, Hunter had 3, Veet had 4, Dyson had 2, Capella had 4, Ricochet had 2. Everyone that played real minutes other than Okongwu had multiple turnovers for the Hawks. Can't have that. That just can't happen. Elsewhere on the rotation, by the way, Garrison had 2 awful games before this, and he was better tonight. So there's that. Hunter kind of had an interesting game where he started out brutally. In fact, at one point between Friday and Saturday, he had missed 16 of 17 shots. Like, all the regression came at once for Hunter's shooting, but he had a better second half. He made a bunch of shots when it didn't really matter, but he got a little bit on track. Ended up with 18 points on 16 shots. He wasn't good efficiency wise, but it was much better as the game went along. Not much to add there. He was okay, but he was not the solution necessarily. That's it for the bench. To the starters, Capella played 19 minutes, 6 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block. I think defensively he was good in this game, honestly, or at least pretty good. Offensively, not. 4 turnovers, can't happen. Missed 2 free throws. Like, it was not a good Clint game. He wasn't as bad as like some other guys were, but it was not a good Clint game as it was for most guys in this game. One of the few bright spots I thought was Ricochet. 13 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal for Ricochet. Still had some moments where he was a rookie for sure, but 4 of 7 from 2, 1 of 4 from 3. Like, he's got to get a little bit more physical overall, but I thought he was pretty good against guards defensively in this one. A couple nice flashes as a driver, and I thought he was pretty good on the whole. Like, he wasn't like he was a great player, but grading on a reasonable curve. Like, I thought he played pretty well in this game. Veet Krejci, 9 points in 28 minutes, minus 26, game worst there. Not necessarily his fault. He was playing without Trae sometimes, but the Veet point guard experiment continues. It's not his fault. It's not his position. He shouldn't be playing there. He's been asked to do that. It's not working. He wasn't particularly good, though. Defensively, kind of rough in this one from Veet in the first half, and 4 turnovers as well. Not great. Dyson Daniels, 11 points, 3 steals, as almost always for him, 3 rebounds and assist. He was 5 of 9 on 2s, 0 of 1 from 3. Not as aggressive as I want him to be on offense at times in this one, but still, like, he wasn't the problem, but not a huge solution either on offense. And then Trae was really good, honestly. I feel bad, but 20 points, 14 assists, and 34 minutes for Trae, 4 rebounds, a steal, 3 turnovers is fine. Minus 7 in the game. In a game they lost by 26. Speaks for itself. He was 3 of 7 from 2, but 4 of 9 from 3. The scoring's been up recently. The passing has always been great. He was the only guy that was like capital G good in this game. You could say Ricochet was better than he often is. Hunter had a good second half. Garrison made some shots early in the game, but like Trae was really the only guy that I would say was like capital G good. And the numbers reflect that. So I'll leave it there for now. It's the same themes it's been for a while. When the Hawks are at full strength, they are pretty good. They're not great, but they're pretty good. Jalen, the Jalen off numbers this year, I have shared many times. They're not updated, I believe, to include today. So I will share them in a moment when I have the number in front of me. But they are let's just say, jarring this seaon, the on-offs for Jalen. So when Jalen Johnson is on the court, the Hawks have about a +3-ish net rating. Not dominant, but pretty good. When Jalen Johnson is off the court, drum roll please, -13 points per 100 possessions. Yeah. And part of that's not, Jalen's a good player, don't get me wrong. Part of that, a lot of that is because he doesn't have a backup. And that's where the Hawks are. They are deficient at the end of their bench right now. Backup point guard, backup power forward are disaster spots. And I'll probably get into this a little bit later on this week. I always say this because it's true. It is harder to make trades than people want to think that it is. But there's an urgency level that probably has to be there if you want to be competitive. And we'll see how that goes. All right, we'll sign off now. The Hawks play again 2 more times on this road trip. The next one is, as far as he teased earlier, is Tuesday in Utah. That is by far the easiest game on the West Coast part of the trip. So if you remember, the first game of the trip was in Toronto. They're bad. That was a nice win for the Hawks. On the West Coast part, only one game is like easy-ish, and it's the game on Tuesday. Now, just stay on brand. Nothing is ever easy in the NBA. Nothing. Especially when you're on the road, especially when you're on the road in the West Coast. And for example, the Jazz, who are, again, very bad this year, they beat the Heat tonight by 36 points in Miami. Now, Miami's got their own issues, which I'll say for another day, but the Jazz are not good. They're 8-25, but they just beat the Heat by 36 in Miami. So anything can happen on Tuesday. Nothing is easy in the NBA on the road. So keep that in mind. I'll cover that game with more vigor when we get there, but circle that one. The Hawks will need to get that win for sure if they want to have a semi-successful road trip in any kind of way. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. Check us out on Apple and Spotify, as well as on YouTube. Like the video there, please, and tell your friends about the podcast. You can also find us on Twitter @LockedOnHawks. Find me there @BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky if you are on that platform @BT Rowland. And I also have non-podcast work on the Hawks. It's patreon.com/BT Rowland. Again, one more time, enjoy your Sunday into Monday. I'll have a show at some point between now and the game on Tuesday night. And we'll see you all next time.